City of Stevens Point Plan Commission meeting, recorded January 4th, 2021.
All right, we have 6 o'clock. I will call the regular Plan Commission meeting of the City of Stevens Point to order. Director Karnowski, could you please call the roll?
Weeza.
Here.
Kneebone.
Here.
Arnson.
Here.
Cooper.
Here.
Haynes.
Here.
Hoppy.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
7-0.
7-0. Everyone is present. As a reminder for those who may be joining us for the first time on a Zoom meeting, etiquette dictates that you keep yourself on mute until you are called upon or wish to speak. Commissioners, of course, unmute yourselves when you vote. You can indicate you wish to speak either through the chat room, or there is a virtual hand that you can raise within Zoom, or if you're joining us on video, you can just kind of wave your hand, and I usually go pretty slow and somehow indicate that you have something to say, and we can do our best to make that happen. So item number 1 on the agenda is the report of the December 7th meeting of the Plan Commission. Those minutes and actions are included in your packet. Are there any discussion items or anything we need to correct or change?
Mr. Mayor, this is Cooper. I'd move approval.
Thank you. We have a second, seconded by Arnson.
Yes.
Any discussion there? That's actually one thing I forgot. When you speak, please identify yourself just so we know, because I can't even see everybody on one screen right now. All right, so we have a motion to approve those minutes and actions, and it's been seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Be opposed? And that is approved. Item number 3 is on page 14, and that is a public hearing with subsequent action on a request from Dan St. Pierre for a conditional use permit to construct a generator and transformer unit at 2217 Rice Street for McKinley School, consistent with Chapter 23.02 sub 1 sub B sub 3 sub F and Chapter 23.02 sub 1 sub D sub 4. Director or our associate planner, who's going to take the lead on this and give us an update?
All Adam.
All right. So as the mayor just mentioned, McKinley Elementary is proposing to construct an emergency generator and transformer on a lot adjacent to McKinley Elementary School, which we'll show you in a brief minute as far as the exact location of it. So just in short, at least from the zoning side of things, the use of a generator transformer, that's compatible with more an accessory type use for the school, which would require a conditional use. And then the second component of this conditional use request is to allow for a modified setback requirement, which are allowed for schools, churches, other institutional type uses per the zoning code. We'll explain a little bit further about that later. So just to give an overview of the location of what we're talking about here this evening. So the image you can see, the parcel rather, you can see on the bottom portion of your screen is McKinley Elementary School, followed by the alleyway heading west to east, separating the school from these 5 residential lots along Rice Street. So this property on the far west is owned and maintained by the school district, and it's utilized as a parking location for McKinley Elementary School. And that went, if some of the commissioners recall, that went before the Plan Commission and Common Council back in 2018 to allow for the use of this parking lot as well. So this parcel second to the left is a single family residence. This middle parcel, this is the property in question where the generator and transformer is proposed. And then followed by these 2 parcels on the far east side, also single family residences as well. So before we get a little bit further looking at the site plan, there's a couple questions that I'm sure some of the commissioners may have or members of the public may have as well. So the first question is, why is a new generator and transformer requested? And the purpose of this, as the applicant can provide in greater detail, is to help support future planned expansions, future planned work to be done for the school, such as renovating the kitchen and serving areas, upgrading the cooling systems, upgrading certain technological devices used within the school. And in order to fulfill the energy needs for these proposed improvements, having a new, more robust generator transformer for emergency use is required as a result. And I should say, just to give added point of clarity as far as emergency use of this. So this emergency use of this is to be used only during, again, emergency uses such as, say, a snowfall, and with these winter months coming along now, if the power would go out, this energy and transformer unit would serve the purpose of fulfilling certain energy needs for certain components of the school if and when that time does arise. So the second question, why is the generator and transformer located where it's proposed? And the main reason for this is due to meeting current electrical clearance requirements for where the generator and the transformer can be located relative to the principal structure, in this case, the school. So as a lot of folks can notice, larger, more older commercial institutional type buildings, you see a generator or a transformer located directly abutting the side of the building. And just as with other components of the electrical code, with the building code, there have been modifications over time that added more wrinkles as far as, in this case, how far away can this proposed generator and transformer be located. So that's one reason, is that since there's a greater clearance that's required as what was allowed, say 10, 20, 30 years ago, having additional clearance is required for this. And another component, and I'll actually jump forward to the site plan here. So you can see, hopefully you all can see my cursor, but here's the location of the existing generator and transformer unit. And the purpose of locating here on the southern portion of this lot, again, owned and maintained by the school district itself, is to provide the clearest point of access for any underground electrical and natural gas connections connecting both the school and the generator and transformer unit. So the third question is, how is noise and lighting addressed within this request? So per zoning code guidelines, any support facilities that are proposed on a lot, in this case, a generator and transformer, they're required to have either adequate landscaping to screen the visibility of said support facilities from public view, or construct fencing around it. Now the applicant is proposing to construct 8-foot high privacy fencing around, which staff believes would help not only hinder the public view of the generator and transformer, but also help hinder any proposed lighting that would be emitted from these two units as a result. That would be shielded. Any lighting that would be emitted would be shielded from public view as well. And for the noise component, as I mentioned before, this generator and transformer is only going to be used during emergency circumstances, such as snow resulting in the main power source being compromised. So this isn't a case where the generator and the transformer is going to be making noise 24/7. Again, it's only going to be in these emergency circumstances when that arises. And I should beg the question, make note of it too. The use of this generator and transformer is similar to any other type of gadget that you plug into another. Let's just say for a TV, for example. When a TV is turned on, again, plugged into the wall, you can see what's on the screen. Depending on what you have, you may be able to hear what's being emitted from the TV as well. But when that TV is turned off, there's still electrical connection. There's still the electrical connection. There's still current running through. And this would hold a similar case in this example as well, in that even when the generator and the transformer is not in operation, there'll still be electrical, there'll still be natural gas flow underneath connecting this unit to the school as well. And then lastly, what will happen to the house located on the subject property? So as we can see here, there is the existing house located on the northern portion of the lot. So as of right now, the house is proposed to stay, but there are plans discussed by the school district to demolish it or relocate the house to a different parcel. And if that would pose a case, there wouldn't be any issues, at least from a zoning perspective, as this use directly abuts this accessory use rather directly abuts the principal use that it serves, in this case, the school. So at least from a zoning perspective, should that happen, it would be in compliance per the definition of any accessory uses in the zoning code. So just to give an overview again of the site plan, you can see here is the generator and transformer. And I should make note too, if you're looking to the left, towards the left of your screen, that's situated north. So if you're running along, this is the alleyway. This will be running from west to east, the farther north, or the farther up you go with the cursor. So as I mentioned, the minimum setback for this parcel for any type of support facility here would be 15 feet, and the applicant is proposing 7.7 feet. Again, this is one of the reasons for the conditional use is to allow for this modified setback requirement. And then on some of the plan sets I was including in the agenda packet, you can see the underground connections both for electrical purposes and then likewise for natural gas purposes as well. So just provide another picture taken from the ground, at least of this alleyway. So you can see here is the entrance for the parking lot, as I addressed earlier, is on the far western portion of the slew of single family lots. Then here is the two dumpsters, and it's approximately going to be right up in here. And there's some additional photos included within the staff report giving a bird's eye view of where the generator and transformer is proposed. And then the existing generator and transformer would be located roughly on the right-hand portion of the picture here. So with that, staff does recommend approval of the conditional use permit being presented as depicted in the staff report with the following conditions. The first of which, that the proposed fencing shall meet applicable fencing standards as outlined in the zoning and building code, subject to review and approval by community development staff. Second, so we did have some internal discussions with city staff as far as if there are any concerns or issues they wanted to raise with the proposal. And one of these was just from the fire department to ensure that this alleyway remains clear of any obstructions, in the event of any fire or EMS access needing to take place, needing to gain access into the lot. Then third, that the rear setback of 7 feet 5 inches shall exist, and then any modifications for this modified setback requirement may require this reapproval for the Plan Commission and Common Council. And then lastly, the two self-explanatory conditions, staff shall have the authority to approve minor changes to the site plan, and then the applicant obtain necessary building. And I can take any of your questions.
Okay, before we open the public hearing, are there any clarifying questions from the commissioners?
Alder Kneebone here. I have a question.
Yes.
We've seen snow emergencies that can last in Wisconsin for a week when power goes down after a major ice storm or windstorm. Would something like this next to my house running for 7 days could really be an annoyance? How loud is this going to be? Is this going to be really, 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 really loud? And could this go on for days?
Well, so Alderperson, I'm going to take some liberty and try and answer your question. First of all, we don't have a decibel meter, but they're loud. They are loud enough where, yes, they could be annoying. However, in an emergency situation, if there's no power in the house next door for a week, I highly doubt that anybody's going to be staying there, because no power means no heat. But yes, in the event of a longer emergency, it could potentially be running for several days. However, emergency generators are usually used just for emergency equipment. So for example, in the city, a generator is used to keep up only the computers, because a crashed computer is usually going to get, well, it's more likely to get damaged. So the intent of the emergency generator is to keep the emergency power going to those critical functions that we need, and then gives the staff time to shut down computers or, send everybody home, keep lighting on while we evacuate the building. And at some point, the generator may not be needed, but there's no guarantees of that. So to directly answer your question to the best of my ability, it's going to be loud, but we can't say how loud. And yes, in the event of a long-term emergency, it could potentially be running for a couple of days.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions before I open the public hearing? Alder
Question.
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if this is an electric generator or if it's running on diesel or what it.
Natural gas is what was explained
I
to
missed
us.
that. Thank you.
And usually there's also some testing. I don't know if that's intended here, but once a week or once every other week or once a month, they'll kick it on for a couple of minutes just to make sure that it continues to run. So
I assume during the middle of the day.
Not necessarily.
So it could be in the middle of the night?
No, it wouldn't be in the middle of the night, but it could be morning. It could be afternoon. It may not be in the middle of the day.
Okay.
But yeah, we wouldn't want them testing it during like normal
3 a.m.
sleep hours, 3 a.m. Right.
Okay.
I understand some people work second shift too, so I don't want to say normal sleep hours. That's kind of assuming. Any other questions from the commissioner before I open the public hearing? All right. With that, I'm going to declare the public. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have a question. I missed.
I'm sorry. This is only for commissioners at this point. So we're going to open up the public hearing now, and then I'll open it up to you, ma'am, with your questions. So again, officially declaring the public hearing open. And ma'am, I only have your phone number ending in 15. So go ahead.
Yes, I'm across the street on Rice Street.
Your
Directly
name,
across
please.
would be Jennifer Hall.
Thank you.
So my concern is noise, pollutants, which you answered the question with natural gas, and then also how big is this thing? Is it going to be a huge eyesore?
Okay. All right. And I'm going to have the director or the associate planner answer your questions after the public hearing. And I don't mean to be rude, ma'am, but the public hearing is testimony only, and we'll answer all of the questions that come up there after the public hearing is closed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Jennings, you had a question.
Yeah, Tori Jennings, Alder District 1. I think you already addressed my question, Mayor, because I was just going to point out that emergency generators are tested on a regular basis, so that adds to the noise. But I do see in the photograph that there appears to be an air raid siren. So it would appear that that neighborhood is fairly used to having very loud noise on a regular test basis. But anyway, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, 11 o'clock every Saturday or thereauts. Public hearing is still open. Does anyone have any testimony regarding this conditional use request? Alder Fischler, you have, I believe, your hand up.
Yeah, hi. Dorothy Schultz included a letter with the packet.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure one of her questions was addressed. She had asked if this generator and transformer would negatively impact the property values of her home and other neighbors surrounding it.
Okay, and we will get to that. I also want to point out that we received an email today from an Anthony, and I hope I'm saying it right, Gishia, who is in opposition to this. They live across the street. It's 2216 Rice Street. They had a concern also about noise pollution potentially and property values. So we will address those questions after the public hearing. Any other testimony regarding the public hearing for this conditional use request? And I apologize if it seems like I'm going slow. I'm just trying to scroll through to see if there's any indication of anyone else wishing to speak. Public hearing is still open. And for the third time, the public hearing remains open. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak during the public hearing, I will declare the public hearing closed, bring it back to the commission. Director Kanoski or Associate Planner Kuhn, could you, to the best of your ability, and I think I see some numbers here on the screen, address the size, the screening, and I know it's speculation, but anything that you might be able to enlighten us on regarding property values?
Sure. So if you look at the pad of the generator and the transformer, those are much larger than the actual generator and transformer themselves. On the screen, Adam, if you want to take your mouse and just scroll over where the proposed generator is, my best guess is that's probably 11 feet by probably 4 feet. So not a giant piece of equipment. The pad itself it sits on is about 21 by 13 feet. And so we'll have a 5-foot separation between the proposed fence and the actual generator. The transformer itself, similar, a little smaller, looks as though it's about 6.5 feet by 6 feet or so. So these, at the end of the day, they aren't large pieces of equipment, and they'll be pretty well screened from the neighboring property. I think something that's been said a few times that these are emergency generators. So in the event there's a storm or any type of event that would cause the power to go out, that's when these would kick on. They do test these things periodically, but typically would be done during the workday. I know, Mayor, you've got an emergency generator outside your window. The only time it's really running is when either we have a power outage or if in the event that they're doing testing. So that would be the first thing. Second, as it relates to property values, a lot of it is speculation, but as it relates to like assessing and property values, having this next door would not likely decrease the assessment of the property. You're still looking from the city's standpoint at the square footage of the lot and the value of the improvements on the lot, i.e. the buildings. And so having this next door likely would not impact the overall property value. But if the commission wishes, I can definitely get an opinion from our city assessor on that as well.
And thank you, Director. I've dealt with enough of those questions with the assessor that I would agree. And I don't know that he would have much different of an answer. There's pros and cons. What is a location, right? You live across the street or next door to a school, that's an advantage for some. You live next to the Conrad signal or across the street from that or a generator, and that is devalued for some, but I don't think it affects the specific property value because they only judge the property value based on that particular parcel, not necessarily what your neighbors are doing. All right, commissioners, you've heard public testimony, you've heard staff recommendations, thoughts, comments, or wishes?
I guess, Commissioner Ernst, I got just a general question. It's going to be fenced and it's going to have siding. Is there any way we can add, noise buffers or something to, again, maybe direct the sound more upwards rather than radially? I have no idea about how these things could get done, but just throwing it out there. Is there a way we can add additional noise suppression?
We could direct staff to include conditions that would require the screening to reduce the volume or the decibel level. But I think generally screening is going to do that to a certain extent. If we're going to do something like that, I would say, we'd have to get into some pretty good specifics. Now, I'm just going to tell you from my perspective, as Director Karnowski said, we have the city or county emergency generator right outside my window across the little driveway. They test it, I believe, every other Wednesday about 9 a.m. And it's no louder than some of the cars that are running in that driveway area. So many days I don't even notice it. But there is a volume, and there can be, depending on which, what the conditions of the environment are, it could be pretty annoying for someone who lives next door if your window is facing that and there's not enough screening. But typically with screening, we require shrubs, arborvitae, something of the like, which
Mayor,
is denser.
That's definitely something that the commission could include. I think having some type of green buffer, if you will, some type of plantings that would absorb additional noise so that it would be less impactful on the surrounding property owners. It's definitely something within the purview of the Plan Commission, definitely something staff would support as well. That additional buffer will also, as long as it's maintained, provide a nicer aesthetic appearance to the property, as opposed to just the fence with the sliding plastic pieces in it as well. So I would recommend to the commission to add the additional landscaping buffer around the transformer and generator.
And Commissioner Arnson, are you confident allowing staff to choose the method of buffer, and we'll just add a conditional use that a noise reducing buffer be included?
That'd be great. Yes. No, I got faith in them.
Is that a motion, sir?
I was going to wait to see if anybody else wants to say anything, but otherwise I'd make a motion with that additional condition.
And I will second that. So right now, we're only going to discuss the additional condition, and that is to direct staff to incorporate noise reducing buffers around the perimeter of the generator. Are there comments or questions in that regard?
Mayor Alder Brown here. I have a comment. I was looking at the packet to find out what the screening requirements were going to be. I agree there should be some kind of landscaping component to provide a better look and a little bit more of a noise buffer as well. So I think that's a good idea.
Good. Yeah, screening and noise buffering are definitely not the same things. Any other comments or questions relating only to that amendment? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a voice vote. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves. And if you are in favor of the amendment, signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any commissioners opposed? Seeing none, we are now considering the conditional use as amended. And again, commissioners, thoughts, comments, or a motion?
I would, this is Commissioner Hoppy. I would move approval with staff recommendations, including the amended recommendation.
As amended. Thank you. Do we have a second?
Haynes will second.
Nebo will second. Oh.
Okay, we'll give the second to Haynes. Seconded by Haynes. Discussion there. All right, commissioners, I think we can do a voice vote on this one. If you are in favor of the conditional use as amended, requiring the additional sound buffering, unmute yourselves and signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? By unanimous consent, that amended conditional use is approved. Item number, well, actually the next couple, 4, 5, and 6 are all related. We'll start with number 4, which is on page 36 of your packet. That's a public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend the City of Stevens Point Comprehensive Plan Future Land Use Map for the purposes of amending the future land use designation from multifamily to park at 2000 Riverview Avenue with the parcel identified. Mr. Kuhn, you have the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. So as the commission may recall, back in November, the commissioners reviewed and approved the request to deal with the master plan proposal for Proholski Park and then common council for the property acquisition. So just to give a brief overview of what the proposed park is entailed. So you can see on the far bottom portion of your screen is the entrance off of Riverview Avenue with the parking stalls and then the open air shelter located directly next to the parking lot, and then the network of trails and boardwalks connecting the parking lot down below by Riverview Avenue all the way up to the Portage County Healthcare Center. So just to give a little overview, at least for the future land use portion of it. So as a condition of approval for that the Plan Commission and Common Council reviewed, one of these conditions was to change a future land use map designation for this property from multifamily, in this case for 3+ units, to park. So this would be fulfilling that condition as outlined in November. So you can see, as I mentioned before, both the property and both the use for this property and the uses surrounding it are generally more higher dense multifamily, with obviously the mobile home park to the east and the south, and then the institutional uses to the north and to the southeast as well. And the bottom portion of the screen, you can see the existing uses for the adjoining properties as well. So there's several things that staff takes a look at with regards to reviewing a future land use amendment. So one of these is making sure that the proposed amendment is consistent with the overall intent of the comprehensive plan. And in this case, the proposal meets various chapters of a comprehensive plan relating to utilities and community facilities, relating to agriculture, natural and cultural resources, and then the land use element. So chapter 4 primarily deals with the purpose of adding the park itself, that this will be utilized not only to fulfill the walk to the campaign as designated by the Parks Department and by lieu of their outdoor rec plan as well. Chapter 5, it meets more of the environmental, and along with chapter 8 as well. And as you recall, back in the master plan for this, there are some environmentally sensitive areas on the northern half vis-a-vis wetlands. So as designated, you can see boardwalks are used to connect the trail network for areas that are going to be located over these wetland areas. So in short, both chapter 5 and chapter 8, the goals that are presented on your screen, by designating this area as park, it preserves and it protects any environmentally sensitive regions in the city, which this amendment would fulfill, again, for chapter 5 and chapter 8. So with that, I don't know, do you want me to run through the whole 4 agenda items, Mayor, or do you want to stop right here?
Got to unmute yourself, Mayor.
See, I was trying to be polite. So I think we can hold off on that, Adam. They're pretty distinct items, and I don't want people to get confused as we go through them. So we can just do a quick recap, as the next 4 items really are related, 3 of them specifically to the modifications on the parcel. And commissioners, I'm sure you remember, this parcel was donated to the city of Stevens Point with certain contingencies. Even though the city may have wished, 15 years ago when we did this plan that it would potentially become multifamily, the legacy that Mrs. Grahalski wishes to instill is keeping this land conservancy, and in this case, the benefit of public use. So it is unlikely that it would ever become multifamily based on the discussions with the woman who donated the land generously to the city. So with that, does any commissioner have clarifying questions before I open the public hearing? Okay, then I'm going to declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on the modification of the comprehensive plan future land use map is urged to step forward or signify somehow that you wish to offer testimony. Be asked for your name and provide that testimony. Public hearing is still open.
There's a gentleman, Ian Proctor, has his hand up.
Oh, I see. I apologize, Mr. Proctor. I didn't see that. Ryan, can you make me a co-host so I can see that? Mr. Proctor, go ahead. Mr. Proctor?
Hello?
Yes, there you go.
Oh, okay. Here I am. I am a property owner. I don't know how to describe it. I am landlocked back here on an easement road that runs through the proposed park. So I guess directly related to what we're discussing here, my questions would revolve around the protection of the wetlands, the sensitive lands that you described that were, that you expressed were important and you would take, you know, proper precautions. The boardwalks run right in front of my house. So those areas, is this a proper time to bring up questions? I guess let's just start with regarding these issues of this boardwalk and this sensitive land.
Honestly,
Can
this
someone
is,
answer if this is the right?
yeah, this is probably not, because we're looking at, and I apologize because it's technicalities, I understand that, but this one is really adjusting the comprehensive plan future land use map. And then the next one, of course, is rezoning from multifamily to conservancy, both of which lend credence to your concern about protecting the wetlands and the property surrounding it. The
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Proctor's, the appropriate time for him to be speaking on
Number
the
7?
design of the park would likely be in number 7, public hearing and
Right.
action on the conditional use permit.
Yeah, and that's what I was looking at. But it does speak, these next two speak to your concerns regarding protection of the wetlands, which is what both of these agenda items, next two agenda items, are designed to do. Does that help, Mr. Proctor?
Okay, sure, I'll wait to speak.
Okay. Public hearing is still open. Public hearing remains open. And for the last time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing no indication of anyone else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Commissioner Happy, I would move approval with staff recommendations.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Haynes will second.
Seconded by Haynes. Discussion. Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves. And if you are in favor of the motion to amend the future land use map, signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Are there any opposed? By unanimous consent, that is approved. Item number 5, 52 of your packet, page 52, is a request from a public hearing and a request from the city of Stevens Point to rezone 2000 Riverview Avenue with the parcel identified from R4 multifamily, 1 residential, to C conservancy zone. Adam, you want to give us an update on this one?
Absolutely. So for any rezoning request, there's three avenues that staff looks at to determine whether or not a rezoning request is applicable. The first of which, as we just discussed, is making sure that the future land use designation for the property is consistent with the rezoning request, which with the rezoning or with the future land use amendment, it would. Secondly is the performance standards for the conservancy district, as you can see on the bottom portion of your screen with regards to lot area, setbacks, etc. And just briefly on this, the proposed location for the open air shelter would meet the appropriate setbacks and it would not exceed the 40-foot maximum height that's allowed for any structures located on the lot. And then we'll talk a little bit more about that as far as the conditional use aspect of this request. And then lastly is the intent. And this is something that we just discussed at the last agenda item, and then which does carry over to this agenda item, is that the purpose of this is to protect environmentally sensitive lands, in this case, wetlands located on the northern
Figure out how to use this one.
of the property. So as such, staff does feel that the proposed rezone does meet the intent of the conservancy district.
It should be noted as well, Mr. Mayor, that the conservancy land use or the conservancy zoning district is the city's most restrictive, meaning that there would be no opportunities to develop things like multiple family residential property, buildings on that property, and is usually used for environmentally sensitive areas and areas in which the city intends to protect parkland, things of that nature. So when we talk about the zoning district itself, it's important to remember that the conservancy zoning district is the most restrictive that we have within our zoning code.
Thank you, Director, for clarifying that. Commissioners, before we open the public hearing, are there any questions? Seeing none, I will declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to offer testimony on the rezoning request, signify that you would wish to speak, and we'll take your name for the record and take that testimony. Public hearing is still open. And for the third time, the public hearing remains open. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, what are your wishes?
Move
Mayor, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Haynes.
Okay, yeah, this is Haynes. I would move approval for the zoning change.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by
Kneebone here.
Kneebone. Discussion. Hearing and seeing none. Commissioners, please unmute yourselves. If you are in favor of the rezoning request, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? By unanimous consent, that is approved. Item number 6 is another public hearing and subsequent action on a request from the City of Stevens Point to amend the official street map of the City of Stevens Point to remove future planned streets to be located within 2000 Riverview Avenue with the parcel identified. This is actually taking a planned street off of the map. And Adam, I'll turn the floor over to you again.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So as included in the agenda packet was the city's official street map designating the location of all current streets, and then in this case, future planned streets as well, designated in green. So located within the property are 2 future planned streets, the first being Allowance Road running east-west between Whiting Avenue and Water Street, and then a unnamed north-south street connecting Allowance Road down to Riverview Avenue. So there's a couple of reasons why staff is in support of the elimination of these 2 future planned streets. The first of which is that these 2 planned streets run within the subject property, which would thus make the proposed use of it being for park space essentially moot in terms of any land that would be available for park-related purposes. The second purpose is based on the transportation element of the comprehensive plan. There's numerous guidelines that the comprehensive plan states as far as the placement of new streets, certain regulations, certain hopes that when the event comes from the engineering department, from community development department, how should the streets be designed for future use? And one of them is to make sure that there are not any negative impacts of the railroad throughout the city. So it is noted that you can see on the official street map that a rail spur Canadian National Railway does run about northwest to southeast, which would intersect pretty close to the Whiting Avenue Allowance Road intersection. And as other folks can recall, for other areas in the city where there's a rail crossing, that in the event if there's a train running through there that could potentially result in any traffic spillage, traffic coming to a halt, frankly, which would be, in essence, one of these negative impacts of the railroad throughout the city. So staff feels that by eliminating these 2 streets, that it would essentially make this potential negative impact of the railroad go away. Another part is that the boardwalks are placed within areas of environmental sensitivity, and that the location of 2 future planned streets could hinder the environmental sensitivity of this overall region. And then going at the heart again of what the transportation element says for the construction of any future planned streets, and that specifically targeting the use of parks. It says that parks, in short, add to the positive visual experience of the community, and that streets should be designed in a way that helps promote the use of parks in the area. And staff feels that by eliminating these 2 streets and vis-a-vis then adding park space onto this region, that would help add and meet this goal and objective. And I guess lastly, it should be should state the obvious here, and the fact that the previous future land use designation and the previous rezoning classification for this lot was multifamily residential, more of a dense residential use for this region. And like any request that goes before this commission for higher density residential use, one of the important indicators to review such a conditional use request is to make sure that the neighboring road infrastructure can meet the demand of greater traffic flow from vehicular traffic, from pedestrian traffic, etc. So by designating this property for park use, you're eliminating, in essence, the need to have additional streets to account for any additional residential units that would be located within this area.
Thank you, Mr. Kuhn. And really it boils down to the commission just approved the zoning of conservancy. If that goes through council, there'll never be a road there anyway, where we're conserving that property.
Mayor, just kind of piggyback on a few things as well regarding this request. First off, Adam, unfortunately, I didn't catch this when I was reviewing the staff report. The Canadian National Railway there is actually abandoned. That's part of the Schrader Connection. So that's actually a recreational trail. That's part of the Green Circle. That just occurred maybe about a year and a half ago. So there is no rail that runs through that area any longer. But when we look at the purpose of a future street map, it's a great document for both the Public Works Department, for the Community Development Department, because when we get projects like the apartments that are on the west side of this proposed park, we're able to require dedication for right-of-way for future street mapping purposes, things of that nature. So actually, if you look at the GIS, we do have a proposed right-of-way along the north side of the apartments, and that proposed right-of-way goes through and meets up right north of the Holiday Mobile Home Park along Water Street. So that's the main purpose that we have these future land use maps, or these future street maps. Part of the reason that there was the north-south one was actually to provide access to, at some point, Mr. Proctor's property, which is almost completely surrounded by the proposed park. So when you take all those things into consideration, and the planned future use of this area as a whole, being a park, it makes sense to amend and remove these future planned streets because there's no purpose in having them anymore.
Thank you. Commissioners, any questions before I open the public hearing?
Yeah, I have one, Commissioner Arntzen. So right now, these streets have right-of-ways established for the city?
No, there's no, there's one small right-of-way in called the northeast part of the park that was established a number of years ago. And then there's future dedicated right-of-way where the apartments are on the west side for the Allowance Road extension. So we only have one small sliver that's actually dedicated right-of-way. The remainder is just future dedication. And as part of some of these development agreements that we've done in the past, if and when the city is ready to build Allowance Road, at that time the property owner would be required to provide us right-of-way. So it's a planning document for Public Works and for community development, but we only have a small piece of that's actually dedicated right-of-way. The rest is future planned right-of-way.
So what would happen to that right-of-way that the city has? Would that, if we agreed to not allow roads there, to change the plan, what happens with that right-of-way?
Nothing. We would likely retain the property, and in the event that there would ever be a desire to extend Allowance Road through, let's say 50 years down the road, it's another conversation that's occurring. It would be most likely advantageous for the city to retain that property for that future planned right away, if it were to ever to come back to fruition.
All right, thanks.
Any other questions from the commissioners? Hearing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. The public hearing is now open. If anyone has testimony on the vacation of this, or changing of the map, I guess, for the street map, signify or indicate somehow that you wish to speak, and we will get you on the record. Public hearing remains open. For the third time, the public hearing is open. Seeing or hearing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed and bring it back to the commissioners. Commissioners, thoughts, comments, or a motion?
This is Commissioner Happy. I'd move approval.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Haynes will second.
Second by Haynes. Any further discussion there? Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves. If you're in favor of this amendment, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That is approved. Item number 7 is a public hearing and action on a request from the city of Stevens Point for a conditional use permit to construct an open air shelter, parking lot, and other improvements consistent with chapter 23.02 sub 1 sub a sub 3 at 2000 Riverview Avenue with the parcel identified. This would be seeking the conditional use to make some of those park amenities that we had talked about earlier. Mr. Proctor, I will get to you as soon as we get an update from our associate planner. Mr. Kuhn, you have the floor.
All right, thank you. So to give a quick rundown as far as a use standpoint, the proposed trail network, the boardwalks, those are considered a permitted use within the Conservancy District. The heart of this conditional use request is for the open air shelter and the parking lot, which are both considered a conditional use within the Conservancy District. So the open air shelter is approximately 256 square feet in size, and as we saw in the master plan a few slides back, is situated on the far northwest portion of the parking lot. Now the parking lot is proposed to have 26 stalls, including 2 that are handicap accessible. Now, bringing a little bit more detail on the trail network itself. Again, this is a permitted use. It'll be made out of 8-foot wide crushed granite. And then, like I mentioned before, boardwalk connections for the locations of environmentally sensitive regions. So again, this is the location showing the parking lot situated down below and the 2 entrances, the trail network, and then the boardwalks in the northern half, again, for where the wetland area lies. And then just to give a brief rundown on the recommendations for the conditional use request. So there are 2 parking lot entrances as I designated below, designated on the lower portion of your screen. So per zoning code standards, there has to be a minimum distance of at least 150 feet. So that'll be the first condition shown on your screen. Second is with regards to landscaping, in that if there's any new trees that are proposed to be planted, showing here on the southern and the northern portion of the parking lot, that it has to meet appropriate landscaping requirements as far as spacing is concerned. Third, that there has to be a building permit obtained for the construction of a proposed freestanding sign located right here on the far near the easternmost parking lot entrance. And then again, that would have to meet applicable sign code requirements. And then fourth, that the proposed trail and boardwalks have to be wide enough to support any fire EMS rescue operations. And this was a condition that was requested by the fire department to make sure that mobility is in sync in case if any rescue operations do need to take place within the park itself. And then the last 3 are more standard requirements, making sure that all parking stall requirements are met, such as having appropriate signage for the ADA stalls, making sure that appropriate width and striping are met, and then having the staff having the ability to make minor changes, and then obtaining all applicable building permits for the request.
I would add, Mr. Mayor, that the existing driveway that's provided for both the private residences that are within the park would remain. The city does have an easement for both properties and for the driveway itself, so the driveway would not change. But there is a boardwalk that would come up next to the driveway entrances, and but there'd still be access. So,
sure. So what you say, Mr. Proctor's driveway easement would still be recognized in perpetuity until whatever changes, if it happens to change, but he would not be restricted in the use of that property, and it would continue on as it currently is. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And I know there were some concerns about the parking lot. However, it's a small parking lot. It is within the wishes of the grantor. It would be built in phases. And very similar to what we do, say, for example, Schmeekley Reserve. There's some segments of the Green Circle Trail that have small parking areas on them. We don't want to impinge upon the natural state, which is also in line with the grantor's wishes of this property. So the amenities that are there are going to be very park-like, similar to, as I said, Schmeekley Reserve or similar places there. Before we open the public hearing, are there questions from the commissioners?
Can you show where that right-of-way is on this map? This is Commissioner Hockey.
It's the yellowish diagonal line about halfway in the middle of the map.
Okay, yep, that's what I thought. Okay, all right, thank you.
And for clear, that's not the right of way. That's the driveway.
Or the driveway,
That's
rather,
the
yes.
driveway.
Sorry, the easement.
That's the driveway easement. Sorry, that's what I meant. Okay.
Certainly less impactful with this project than it would be for multifamily housing, and I'm glad we're not doing that. Any other questions from the commissioners? Okay, then I will declare the public hearing open. If you have testimony, please state your name and the comments that you have. Mr. Proctor, I will give you the floor.
Hi, thanks. I appreciate that. We do have concerns about the land and our property as well. We have multiple concerns. I mean, let's just start out by some liability and privacy concerns that we have. We're obviously back here in the woods a little bit, and we've had the luxury of this private kind of location, which has been nice. I do stand behind the park. I think it's a good use for the property, but we are looking at being probably the only residents here on this map that I can tell that are going to be really closely affected by the boardwalks as they cross the front of our property. If you were to walk down this road and take a closer look, get a firsthand look, you would see just how we are kind of isolated back here, and we don't have immediate neighbors or much lighting or anything like that. And essentially those boardwalks coming, approximately within 10 feet of the entrance to our property are basically like right outside our front door. So we have some concerns, and I don't know if right now is the right time to bring up those concerns about our property. But I do know that I'd like to discuss that further with the right person or at the right time. And then we also have concerns about the wetlands itself in regards to, the effect that the developing these boardwalks and trails might have on these wetlands. We consider ourselves ambassadors of sorts. We've been living up front in a house up front and then back here on this property for the past 10 years. So we know the ecosystem, and we know there's sensitive animals and plants, including endangered animals and plants in here, and it's a rearing ground for a lot of these animals. And so I'm looking to discuss with somebody or be guided in the right way to discuss with somebody these boardwalks, their positioning, and the effects on the wetlands, but also the effects on our properties. So would this be the right time to bring up our specific issues here?
If you have specific concerns, as the director said earlier, the boardwalks are not really in question.
Okay.
But I would certainly be interested. I mean, Ms. Proctor, you and I have talked before about this. I would suggest that you work with our Parks Director, Dan Kramer.
Okay.
I think you've talked to him before as well. We will be as respectful as we possibly can, but I can tell you that we agree 100%. We appreciate you being stewards of the land, and we expect that we will be respectful in that regard as well. We have foresters, we have a variety of people whose sole job it is to take care of that property, whether it's wetlands or highlands or specific species of animals. And we take pride in knowing that we also are good stewards of our parkland and any land really that falls under the city purview. The boardwalk location, I know they've been working on that, and that's been determined to be the most, or I should say least impactful. 10 feet off of your property line, I actually am a little jealous that you live in such a remote area, because the sidewalk in front of my house, which gets used by just about everybody, is probably about 10 feet from my bedroom window in some cases. So it's, I understand and respect your concerns. You're certainly welcome to bring them up here, but I think it would be best served working with our Parks Department, our forester and biologists and such to address those concerns. Is that acceptable, sir?
Yes, I think so.
Director Kramer, I know you're listening. I think you already have Mr. Proctor's number. I'd ask that you give him a call tomorrow morning, or whatever time is convenient for him to discuss his concerns.
Sounds good. I think we can connect on that.
Great. Anyone else for the public hearing? The public hearing is still open. Alder Jennings, I think you had a question or a comment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Weezer. Tori Jennings, Alder District 1. I'd like the commission to consider recommending having the cutting in half the number of parking stalls. 26 stalls is a significant number for a small park like this. Each stall costs the city money to construct, to clear, to salt, to repair, and ultimately replace. Referencing Mead Park was another example that arguably, depending on what position people take, an example of the city unnecessarily expanding parking and costing the city a great deal of money in that process. So the number of stalls here seems excessive, and there is a cost to that over time, and I don't see how it benefits the what this park means to the family, what this park means to the city, and what parks mean in general. So those are my comments to the commission.
Thank you. Director Kramer, if you're going to address Alder Jennings' comments, I'd prefer you do it after the public hearing. Public hearing remains open.
Mayor, Alder Kneebone.
Yes, ma'am.
In keeping with Trevor Rourke's comments always coming at the end of a public hearing, he has asked me to read a statement. So I think if it's appropriate now, I'll do that. Speaking for Trevor.
Okay. Is there a reason he's not here on his own?
He's got some family obligations tonight,
Gotcha.
And he could not.
And he asked you to read that.
Yes, he did.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
So this is from Trevor Rourke, 601 Washington Avenue. I'm presenting this statement as a resident and not representing any group or commission. After reviewing the packet, I think this new public park will be a great South Central feature to our city. I talked with Director Kramer briefly today about some of the history in developing this park and the transportation planning with it. I asked if the Portage County countywide bicycle and pedestrian plan was considered in reviewing how this park connects to Riverview Avenue, and he agreed that it would be good to make note tonight. So I'm asking that you please consider reviewing the connectivity and Portage County countywide bicycle pedestrian plan recommendations for Riverview Avenue in future planning and design. For example, and Director Kramer agreed, street parking might be very valuable if future events are hosted at this site and overflow parking is needed. This would directly affect how the Portage County bicycle plan is implemented along this connecting roadway. Having these align would be key. Thanks for your consideration, Trevor Rourke. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Public hearing remains open.
We're 727 2nd Street.
Yes, sir.
Regarding the last two comments concerning the parking lot, my recollection is that when the apartment buildings were put up on the map that's shown on the video right now, the northwest portion of the map, there was a concern because the railroad was still active at that point in time. And the city had to negotiate with the county highway department because of the fact that Riverview is a double H, it's a county highway. To put an access point off Riverview in the event that the normal roadway coming off of Whiting Avenue could be blocked by rail traffic and there might be a fire or some sort of emergency there. And I note now on this plan that's shown that there are 2 access points for this parking lot. Has the city coordinated with the county highway department to place 2 access points on Riverview, which is County Highway double H? It's just a question and suggestion that we get it cleared with the county before we put access points on their highway.
Thank you, sir. Public hearing remains open. Public hearing is still open. For the 3rd time, public hearing is open. Okay, seeing no one else wishing to speak, I will declare the public hearing closed. And we're going to start with Director Kramer. I know you had some comments, and you can speak a little bit about the access on double H as well.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wrote down some items here. If I missed something, please let me know. But I'll start with the question or the inquiry about the parking lot size. So I want to remind everyone that this is, at this point, these are not design documents. So we've gone through a pretty extensive planning process and review process of what the family wishes were, the city's wishes were, and we've came up with this overall concept plan. What the city has actually agreed to in terms of an agreement for the park development in the first 5 years and ultimately the immediate future is actually to construct half of the lot in a gravel parking lot format. And the idea is that would allow the park to begin to be utilized and develop with the green space and allow us to gauge the actual usage of it for the Schrader connection, the park itself, people that are going there just for lunch or to just recreate. And should the need arise, as you see, we have the space for the full 26 stalls. And obviously, as things with the roads change, if there's ever street parking or anything like that, that would be incorporated. So with that said, though, when we laid it out, we wanted to have it laid out in a facet that it's conceivable that 50 years from now, 100 years from now, whenever it would be, should something be put in the green space, a park amenity of some sort, if it's permitted, that might drive some more usage to the park. Those things are not part of the plan, not part of the wishes right now. However, planning to say that this would be larger if we needed to be at that time was part of the idea. So during the design piece is where we would incorporate ultimately in this first 5 years, just half the lot in gravel is what we're planning. On the comments from Mr. Rourke, him and I did have a conversation and we talked about things about off-street parking, things of that nature. If something were to change on street, that was the piece that we had talked about. That would allow that to be considered at that time as well. Right now, we don't have that freedom, I guess, or capability. So down the road, I said, in terms of a park planning, a recreational planning, if we're planning a race or a walk or an event, more if we have on-street parking is actually better for the park. We're allowed to be able to bring more people close to it. So that was what we had talked through at that point. And Trevor had stated he'd be willing to converse with the Parks Department as we get further in this process down the future. So we welcome those conversations. Director Konoski and Director Badoon would obviously be really the planners for that piece, and I would more just give my feedback on how it interacts with the park, and I would rely on those two. They're very well versed on the road piece of it, obviously in that part or that area. On the county highway question, that's also a great question. When we would actually design this, what we basically done, so there's 2 pieces of this that interact directly with the county. On the north side of the parcel, as you know, there's the county health department, that property all borders this. The concept calls for trying to go out through and maybe work out a portion where we could put the actual trail network on their land, whether that be an easement or agreement. That is not formalized. It's really a concept at this point. So we had talked with the county administrator and gone through what that would look like. We're familiar with what approvals would be required on the county government process, but that's not a for sure thing. So we put it as a depiction to say this is what we'd like to do as the plan. However, there would be more approvals that are necessary. Similarly, on the south end, when we would go through design and the formal permitting, same thing with the environmental reviews that we would do before we did any grading to make sure we protected any endangered species or animal habitat. That would be where we would confirm that both access points would be allowed. If they wouldn't, at that point, we would have to review this again. And obviously we'd run that past Director Karnowski and make sure it's in compliance. But we believe that the single one-way entrance and one-way exit will be what's most appropriate in this case on the concept. I think that addresses all three questions, but I'm here if there's any more that come up.
I believe so, Director. Thank you very much for doing that. Commissioners, thoughts, comments, or a motion?
Mr. Mayor, this is Commissioner Cooper. I would move approval of the request as presented.
Thank you very much. Do we have a second?
Arnson will second.
Arnson will second. So we have a motion and a second to approve as requested. I am going to just direct Director Kramer to get in contact with Mr. Proctor as soon as applicable and discuss his concerns and see if we can work within some of that in that regard. It doesn't need to be part of the motion, however, staff will just take care of that. Any questions on the motion or discussion on the motion? Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves. And if you are in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, by unanimous consent, that is approved. Item number 8 is on page 71 of your packet. And this is something that is really more of a government requirement and for your information. That is a review and consideration of the 2019 Housing Affordability Report. Director Karnowski.
Thank you, Mayor. So it is required by our state legislature starting last year. We are required to put together what they have titled a Housing Affordability Report. Although it should be noted that the Housing Affordability Report really has nothing to do with existing housing and making it affordable. It really is focused on what I'll call subdivision and greenfield development and making the development of that housing more affordable solely from the city's impact fees and our timing to get projects done and over with. If you read the report thoroughly, you can probably sense my disdain for having to put this together on a yearly basis. But now that we've kind of gotten into it, I'll just go through it real quickly. Essentially, it should be noted again that this report's intended to outline the financial impact on subdivision development based on the developer's viewpoint of greenfield development. And so it doesn't take into consideration the city's long-term costs to maintain road infrastructure, water, sewer infrastructure, things of that nature.
Director, I want to point out too, before you get started, because it just touch on a couple of the highlights, because this document is available on the city website at stevenspoint.com for anyone to review.
Correct. Yes, it will be published officially to our website after this body and the Common Council review it. But essentially taking census data, placing that within the document itself, identifying where our community is at in terms of housing affordability with existing housing, monthly costs and percentage of household income as it relates to things like mortgage payments, insurance payments, escrowing for property taxes, things of that nature, and then non-owner occupied housing renters. This is all information that's available on the American Community Survey, which is done yearly through the U.S. Census Bureau. Once the 2020 census is completed, we'll use that data going forward as well. The American Community Survey is actually being phased out, which is super unfortunate because it's a great resource for your city staff. And then it requires us to look at housing goals within our comprehensive plan and ensuring that we're meeting those housing goals itself. So you'll see an outline of the goals of the city's comprehensive plan as it relates solely to housing. Now, if you scroll on a little bit, this is for fiscal year 2019. So we did have 13 new single family residential dwellings. Our average fee for project is roughly $2,900. Average project cost, or what's declared as the project value on the property, is roughly $351,000, and this was in 2019. And so pretty substantial. Someone who makes the average median income for the city of Stevens Point, which is roughly $45,000 for an individual, that increases to about $70,000 for a two-person family, and increases from there depending on the size of the family. It's not an affordable housing thing. If you're building new construction, historically, that's not affordable housing. And so by the city reducing our impact fees, which average about $1,500 a house, likely will not impact the cost that individuals would take to build a new home. And it is an argument that I've made within my own professional circle that even though you reduce the cost per unit of impact fees that would be charged to a developer, it does not mean that that cost that the developer is saving is shifted at all to the property owner, to the property purchaser. So again, I can go on for hours about this report because of my own frustrations with it. But really at the end of the day, it wants the city to identify ways that we can reduce our total impacts and the total time required to get a new subdivision approved in a greenfield subdivision by 20%. Your city staff, via being creative, thought, well, let's look at how we could reduce the time it would take to get something approved. And so anything that like we would want to do that's actually affordable, let's say someone wanted to come in and do a cottage style housing development where the homes there are, instead of $350,000, are $200,000 as an example. Instead of going through the planned unit development process or planned development district overlay zoning, and going through the conceptual plan, the public hearing portion, and the common council portion, if you had, let's say, 4 or fewer units, is that something that staff could review and approve internally, thereby reducing the amount of time it would take for a project to go from conceptual to staff review to approved, minor subdivision, to having shovels in the ground, if you will. And so that's one way that we thought, as part of our the rewrite of our city's zoning code, that might be something we want to look into the future. Again, if you look at the financial impact of fees on development, we essentially charge roughly $1,500 a unit. So we are minimal compared to even our friends to the south of us at the Village of Plover, who passes along things like sewer impact fees and water impact fees to help service debt on new water and utility infrastructure. We don't do that within the city. And so even by our peer communities, we have a very minimal impact as opposed to others around us.
Thank you very much, Director.
So
I'm sorry,
yeah,
is there anything
and then
to add?
just real quick, finally, as also required, you'll see undeveloped parcels permitted for residential use. That's a number of pages, and then mapping itself, which is also required as part of it. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that other folks may have, but it's a fairly straightforward report that we have to do yearly. This is for 2019. This time next year, we'll do the 2020 report as well.
Thank you, Director. Are there any questions for the Director?
Mayor Alden, I just have a quick comment. Director Konoski, isn't that what associate planners are for? To do all those reports that you don't want to do?
I enjoy writing these reports. I take my frustration out on the keyboard. So,
thank you. Any other questions for the Director? Commissioner Arntzen.
Yeah, I recall this from last year, I think, or maybe the year before. And it ties in with the map. Does the map show all? Okay, I didn't see it on yours. I'm just wondering if all these developable parcels are shown on a map somewhere, and it looks like it is.
Yeah, developable is a loose and fast term in this document because there's no requirement that we look at things like environmental constraints, transportation constraints, utility constraints. All the state requires is that you say, here's a vacant piece of property, you can build on it, So include it as part of the map itself.
Right. And I share Director Konoski's frustration with this, because I can tell you we've got parcels in the city that will likely never be developed, even though they're vacant, because the cost to run utilities is so significant, or other extenuating circumstances. It's the reason they're not developed now. And I would rather focus on affordable housing rather than the ability to streamline and reduce the cost for developers. We do a very good job with that, and I don't want to be misinterpreted there. As Director Konoski said, our fees are relatively low compared to even surrounding areas. But I think the bigger concern, and I think the more impactful concern, would be to address affordable housing options rather than the affordability to construct a subdivision.
Yeah.
With that,
if I could just add one little more nugget of information. The state does not allow Wisconsin municipalities to enforce what's called an inclusionary zoning, i.e. if you build a 120 unit subdivision on an 80-acre parcel, in other states, you can say 10% of that has to be dedicated towards affordable housing. Wisconsin state statute doesn't even allow us to do something like that. And so you can thinly veil it however you want, but the fact that we aren't allowed to help regulate affordable housing within new residential construction is frustrating in and of itself. So that's what I'll say about that.
It certainly is. And Director Konoski and I had a discussion about that just today, and you can tell that he's passionate about it, which is a strong testament to his passion for his career and making sure that the citizens of Stevens Point are cared for. We'll go higher up the ladder, Ryan. Any other questions? If not, I'd be looking for a motion to accept the report and place it on file.
Kneebone here, so moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Arnson will second.
Arnson seconds. Discussion? Hearing none, commissioners, please unmute yourselves. And if you are in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that is unanimously approved as well. Item number 9 is the December 2020 monthly report. Director.
So the final report for 2020, again, a very strong year in new valuation, 154 million, which is way up from previous years, even our really strong years. Of course, we have a number of developments to thank for that, including Northside Yard, the Berkshire Housing Project, Delta Dental, and Century's Boutique Hotel. But for the month of December, declared valuation of $831,000, which resulted in fees collected by the city of $9,310.73. Nothing too earth-shattering for December. Again, 2021 likely going to be a down year for us. COVID has really put a break on a number of projects that we were working on. However, I feel very comfortable that 22 and 23 are going to be strong years for the community.
Good, thank you. Any questions for the director regarding the report? I think we're going to start seeing a lot of snow and ice violations. Just a prediction. All right. I don't think we need a motion to accept that and place it on file. And the last item on our agenda is the director's report that was included in your packet. Director, any highlights you want to touch on?
Nothing that's significant, other than if you drive by Northside Yard, you'll see some upward movement, which is really exciting. So the elevator shaft for the first building is currently being laid. So
upward movement, I like that. Any questions for the director regarding the director's report? Hearing none, our agenda is exhausted. And we are adjourned at, looks like 7:24. Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.